Today, I want to show you not only how to make this card, but also how to avoid some common mistakes that I made and solutions to help avoid waste. I would love your comments on how you like this card, and if you do like it, or you learned something today, please hit the like button. So join me today as I create this beautiful card and show some of my mistakes and fixes along the way. Now let's get crafting.
For our supplies, we're starting out today with patterned paper. Now this paper has two different designs on it, and I'm going to use one for the background piece on the front of the card and one for the background piece on the inside of the card. You can also choose to use two different papers, as you will see me use later. Also, I'll need a sheet of white cardstock, and then I have some of this black shimmery cardstock I'm going to use for my greeting background, and some blue I'm going to use for my greeting. In addition, I'm going to use this flourished butterfly stamp and die set today from Kathleen Pooler. Along with that, I'm adding a few shades of pink, yellow, and green, and then finally a happy birthday die set. Let's start with the stamps. I'm using the Versamark ink so I can emboss the stamps with white embossing powder. Now I chose white because I want the stamped image to remain the color of the paper, and then I'll be adding color behind the stamp for a different look. Now if this sounds strange, this will make more sense once we get into it. Now always start your embossing with an anti-static pad on your paper. Now I'm going to use two different butterfly stamps, and I'm going to stamp them a few times using the Versamark ink. Now I may not use all the stamped images today, but I figured since I'm making them, I might as well make a few extras I can use later. The Versamark ink is just going to add a clear stamped image onto the paper, and it's impossible to see on the video. Even live, you'll have to tilt your paper to see where it is. After stamping a few butterflies, I will then take some white embossing powder and pour that over top of the inked image. Now make sure you get a really good coat of the embossing powder. And once I have these all powdered up, I'm going to go then take them over to the heat gun and apply heat. Once these are done, I'm going to do the same thing now, this time except I'm going to use flowers and leaves. Okay, with all the embossing done, now it's time for the fun to begin. I'm taking this In the Park ink and putting it on my glass mat. While using a blending brush, I'm going to brush the ink over top of where I stamped the leaves. Then I'm going to add some of the party dress and glitz, and I'm going to add some color to the background of the flowers and then the butterflies. Now you can add as much color as you want to be as bright as you want it to be. Now one thing I like about these Kathleen Pooler inks is that they stay wet for a little bit so that you can really do a nice job blending your colors. Once you're done adding all the color, take a clean cloth and wipe it over the top of your stamped image to reveal the white embossing powder. So, how do you like this reverse embossing? Now that we have the butterflies and the flowers colored, we're going to use the die set to cut them out. Now I'm using the magnetic mat for the Sizzix Big Shot, so I don't have to tape down the small dies. Although sometimes it's a little finicky getting the dies lined up over the stamped images, it makes the process so much easier. Just line up all your dies and crank them through. So I think these came out really pretty. I like the different look of them when we add them to the card with the patterned paper, and I hope you agree. So now let's get to our happy birthday greeting. I'm using the light blue paper, and that's going to be the written words. And then I'm going to use the shiny black paper from my background or my shadow. Now because I want to save time, I'm just laying them both on the cutting mat at the same time, and then I'll just crank them through once, and everything is done. Now here's the first place where you want to be mindful of what you're doing. The dot for the I in birthday is super small and can easily get lost. So to avoid losing it, I immediately want the words glued to the background as soon as they're done being cut out. So I'm going to add the smallest amount of glue to the die cut words, and then I'll place them on top of the shadow or the black. Now to get the dot for the I in birthday, I'm using this little gem picker to pick it up. And then I'm just going to put the smallest, tiniest dot of glue on it and get it right in place. Now, if you did lose the dot to your I have an idea later that's going to help you out. With all the small pieces created, now we can work on the card base. Here is an added tip. If you ever want to remake a card or design, I always make a template first. And that way, I don't have to remeasure pieces of paper and figure out all the math involved in making a card. I just make a template and then I write all the measurements on each of the pieces that I go with the cut. This way, if I want to recut the card a week later or 6 months later, I know exactly what size I need for each part of the card. Now, if you have a Cricut or another paper cutter machine, you can also cut out the card base using that. Now, I did a video using my Cricut, which gives you all the cuts in a step-by-step manner. Just look for the link in the description below. Now let's get cutting the paper. I'm going to start with my 8.5 by 11 sheet of white paper, and I'm cutting it down lengthwise to 4.25 inches. And this is going to be the base of my card. Now with the second half of that sheet, I'm going to cut that down so that I get the inside greeting panels. Those are cut at 2.5 inches by 1 5/8 for the top panel, and 2.25 by 1 7/8 for the bottom. Now once I have the pieces cut, I put my templates away, and that way I won't get confused with actually what I'm working with when I'm putting the card together. All right, so those are the easy cuts. Now we get to the part that gave me a little bit of a challenge today when I was making this card. I want the background panels on the front to have this large print. So I'm kind of lining up my template so I can see where I want to cut out the main paper from. Here I just bumped it up a little bit and cut off some on the bottom so it would line up nicely. Now, because I was using one-sided background paper, I ended up cutting some of the panels in the wrong direction. I wanted to cut them so that they would have the long panel on the bottom and a short panel on the top, like the capital letter L. And then on the inside, I want the reverse of that. Well, I messed it up. I'll show you what I did with those miscuts later, but first let's get this card right. So let's stop, rethink, and start again. I found the best way to make sure my cuts were correct was actually to stack 2 4 by 5.25 pieces of patterned paper. And you see here, I switched my paper. So now there's 2 different papers, so you can tell the differences. Now, you want to put the pieces on top of each other, and you're going to line up the long side of the stacked pieces at 2.5 inches. And then slowly cut down to 2 1/8 inches. Stop cutting and remove the paper. Then take the paper and rotate it anti-clockwise so that the short side is at the top at 2 1/8 inches. Then again, you're going to slowly cut down, this time to the 2.5 inch mark. Go slow. You should feel it when you hit the exact spot where it connects with the first line you cut. So now I have my 2 pieces cut in the correct orientation. Now, if you didn't cut slowly enough and you may have overcut your paper, I'm going to show you how to fix that later on. All right, now it's time to cut and score the base of the card. All right, there's 2 ways of doing this. The first way is to use a scoreboard to score it and then cut. So put your paper on and score at 5.5 inches straight across the paper. Then use a ruler and lay it down so that the top of the ruler is at 2 1/8 inches. Score the top half of the card down 2 3/4 inches. Move the edge of the ruler so now that the bottom of the ruler is at 2 1/8 inches down, and you're going to score at 8 1/4 inches from the middle to the bottom. Now remember, if you don't have a scoring board, keep watching and I'll show you later how to do it differently without a scoring board. Take your paper right now to the paper cutter, and you're going to line up the paper at 2 1/8 inches, and you're going to cut from 2 3/4 inches down to 8 1/4 inches down. Use the ruler on the side of your paper cutter. Now this cut should line up right with the score lines you did earlier. So the first thing you want to do is fold the card in half. Give it a good strong fold using a creaser like a bone folder. Then open it up and you're going to bend the top section of the card back and the bottom section of the card forward. Once you have a good bend, you can fold the card over again, and then you want to crease all your bends, and your base is done. The first thing we're going to add to the base of the card is the background papers. Now, I'm going to use the bigger print on the front and the more subtle print on the inside of the card. Always tape the inside panel first so that you can line everything up correctly. Add tape along the edges and in the middle, and line it up in the center of the inside panel and press it down so it's set in place. For the front panel, add your tape, and then when you're ready to place it down, close the card. You want to line up the top edge of the front panel with the top inside edge of the inside panel so that a line goes straight across. You also want to line up the side of the inside panel with the side of the front panel so you have a straight line going down. Now to add the butterflies, I put some foam tape behind them so they pop out. And then adding the flowers and the leaves, I'm just kind of tucking them in around and behind the butterflies just to complete the look. The last step is to add the greeting. Again, I'm adding foam tape to the greeting shadow layer, and I'm going to place it on the bottom of the card. The inside greeting panels are the last thing to add, and when adding the panels, you want to make sure that they aren't seen when the card is closed. So make sure that the inside bottom panel is below the cut line. Now, in case you lost the dot to your I in birthday, here's a quick fix. Use some liquid pearls or a piece of glitter to add your own dot. To cut your base a different way, first cut the center split. Line up your paper at 2 1/8 inches, and then cut down starting at 2 3/4 inches and cut down to 8 1/4 inches. Again, using the side ruler on your paper cutter. Using a ruler, put the ruler through the cut crease, and at the top section, you're going to just bend the top section in. Repeat the same thing with the bottom section on the right. Once you have a good bend, then you want to take the card and fold it in half by lining up the two short sides and creasing it so you have a center fold. Fold it over and crease all seams. Here is what I am using some of my miscut background pieces that I had that actually had the long section at the top and the short at the bottom. So I just reversed the card and reversed the folds I made in the card. Now you can see I have a long section on the top and short on the bottom on the front. Now, if you overcut the background paper, just use an embellishment to cover that cut. Here I used a flower and part of a butterfly.
So I hope you liked this card today and were able to learn something from my mistakes and methods of putting it together. Let me know what you think. Remember, I also have the same card cut in Cricut step-by-step tutorial, which is linked below. If you like this video, please hit the like button and let me know what you liked about it in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and I'll continue to share my creative days with you. And that's all till our next creative day.